Hi, everyone. Welcome to this monthly peer-to-peer learning circle with OFMA. Today's topic, we're going to be mostly looking at consignment tables, and we're going to be hearing from 3 farmers markets about how they run the consignment table programs at their market. And if there's any time left after Q&A, we might just open it up and answer any questions that you guys might have about things that are going on at your farmers markets or things that you want to bring up to talk about, or we can make notes of things to talk about for another peer-to-peer learning circle next time. Hannah, if you want to, there we go. So just a little bit of housekeeping here. You can always turn your video off if you don't want to be on camera. Just keep your microphone also off during the presentations. You can turn it back on when we do the Q&A. You can use, so the way we're going to set this up is we're going to have the 3 presentations go, and then we'll do Q&A for all of them at the end. If there's a question that you have in the middle that you don't want to forget, you can always put it in the chat box and we'll remember it and get back to it. And this hour is being recorded, and we'll put it on OFMA's website so you can watch it again later or share it with your other staff or board members or whatever you like to do. And then we also have a couple of upcoming events. Later this week, we have another session with Aorta. It's going to be on how to be more anti-racist in your recruitment of vendors, volunteers, and market staff, and what you can do to change your policies and procedures around that to help you do a better job. And then also just to say like what these monthly sessions are that you're at right now. These are our monthly peer-to-peer learning sessions. The idea is that we want to be able to connect you guys, other people that run farmers markets, or volunteers or board members at farmers markets, so that you can ask each other for expertise and experience about how to do what you do. We try to focus on a topic, but if we don't have a specific topic, we may just open the floor sometimes for whatever is currently emerging and let you guys talk about whatever is happening at your market at that time. If you're not on the monthly calendar invite and would like to be, just put your email in the chat and we'll add you to it. And that way you will get an invite or a reminder directly from your calendar. So let's see. Actually, we're starting with Rebecca. Rebecca is the market manager at the Corvallis Albany Farmers Market. After Rebecca, we will talk with Eileen, who's at the Dales Farmers Market, and then Hannah Ladwig from Gorge Grown will be sharing about the community table at her market. So go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, I'm gonna get my, let's see if this is there's 2 of them up here, so I want to make sure this is the one, hopefully. Well, they're not a lot different. Okay, CAFM is Corvallis Albany Farmers Markets. Although our oldest market is older than this, we began community tables in 1991. First, we want to talk, I think one of the things that many of you that don't have a community table would most want to know about is why should we even consider doing this? So my first bullet is a little bit cheeky, but there are always people in your community who have a need to sell some produce, and they may feel aggrieved when you tell them no. And this is an alternative. You can't ask this child of the parent calling to pay for a membership and a stall fee. That's not going to work, but the community table might work for a situation like that. More importantly, perhaps you want as low as possible a step on the ladder for new and beginning growers. I want to say in my experience, most consignors don't actually become vendors. I think that in other markets, the experience is different. So I believe that some of the other presenters will have a different experience of that. But even if it's only 1 or 2 over a period of years, that's still valuable for those 1 or 2 people. One of the fun surprises that you get out of running community table is you get some unusual products that you might not ever see in quantity sufficient for selling at a market. For us, that's somebody has a pawpaw tree. Other things don't spring to mind right now, but before things show up at the market, before they become, you know, the it girl of the market, they might show up in the community table with someone experimenting with them. And for us, we don't allow a vendor to be at the market as a vendor and in the community table at the same time. But if they need to be off for a week, or if they want to ramp up or ramp down their season, it's a perfect option for them. And we are discovering also that for our oldest vendors, the community table is something of a graceful way to ramp down their career as a market vendor. Okay. History for us is that our community table program started in 1991 at the same time that we were starting the Corvallis Saturday Farmers Market. We loosely based it on the model that was given to us by the Lane County Farmers Market at that time, but this is a long time ago, and I'm not speaking to what's going on at Lane County at this time. If I remember correctly, though, we were fairly well matching what they were doing 30 years ago. We tried it for a year with paid market staff doing it. I think we had a grant, and that was no longer feasible, nor was it really supported by the membership to continue in that way. But the membership was open to it continuing in the way that we're doing it today, which is more like the community table is a vendor. And the Corvallis Saturday community table actually has a credit union account and is sort of passed from person to person over time. And then at our other markets, as we were developing it there, it more morphed into something where we designated a particular vendor who would take the vast majority of all consignments at the market and operate under similar rules. Here's how it works for us, and there are probably many different ways to run this sort of thing, but we do want some data on them. So I do recommend having some very small applications so that you can help screen the products of what's coming in. People may not read your website that says everything at the community table has to meet the market guidelines. And so this is a way to make sure that somebody doesn't bring something that you aren't wanting to be at the market. How it's managed in the booth, a simple form that I can share with people that lists the products and quantities and on maybe a half sheet of paper for somebody that doesn't have that many different products. That's left with the product. The consignor goes away for the day, lives their life on Saturday, and then comes back at the end of the market. And our community tables all have scales, so product can be sold by weight, but it is possible to get by without that and do it totally by volume. Currently, our operators are taking 25% of gross sales. That helps them pay for their stall fees and any infrastructure that they've purchased. They take that out and pay cash at the end. And the operators of the community table usually retain the tokens and the vouchers and deal with that themselves. It's much easier to keep that out of the relationship. Here's some finer points that I'm sure there are many more, but these were what came to mind. You really want some consistency, so I would advise finding operators who are already going to be at the market most weeks with their own product, or who want to be there for some other reason all the time. You need to communicate with them, especially if they're not staff. A little extra effort may be required to communicate with them to make sure that no unauthorized products are sold in the booth. It's also an attitude thing. If you want somebody who really cares about helping others succeed at this level, and not just trying to offset their own stall fees with the fees that they collect from these consigners. If they do that, you're going to be dealing with a lot of complaints, and you're going to be sorry that you ever set off on this path. And I have been there. you need, yeah, you need to have somebody who is rowing in the same direction with the consigners. I would recommend also that you limit the consignment or second farm allowed outside your system, but that's really a question of what your guidelines and your governing body wants to be happening in your market. But for me, for us, my board wanted to channel most consignment activity through this medium and limit the consignment and second farm sort of thing to situations where it really made sense and did not make sense to use the consignment table. I would recommend, banners are cheap. I would recommend making one so that your customers know that this booth is different from other vendors in your market. There's and tags. I didn't put that in here. Tags on product would be a good idea as well. You could make them a template that labels things as community table and has place for the farm name to identify who actually grew it. Okay, my heartwarming story, we discussed ahead of time that might be something people would enjoy, and I have one. We have a grower of figs who has been doing this for decades, and he is now 96. And now I'm talking to a caretaker who drops off the, oh, shoot, sorry, I did not edit this here. I did not get any pictures done. And then this is a tab that we use to communicate about the community tables with people. It's unfortunately not the tab of my webpage that I spend the most time on, but and I tend to I tend to forget it when things are going well, especially, and maybe that's a good thing, but it's not been top of mind here in COVID. So I will take questions at the end. And I need to figure out how to not share. Okay. I can do that now. Did you already take it away from me? Have you already ended my sharing?
Yeah, I think you're all,
okay,
you're all
good.
done.
Okay, good.
Awesome.
All right. I just want to make sure I wasn't still hanging out there.
Awesome. I'm going to pull up Eileen's slides in just 1 second. So, and then Eileen, you're ready to take it away.
Okay.
Okay, here we are.
Well, I'll go ahead while you're getting that up. I'm Eileen White. I'm with the Dallas Farmers Market. I've been their market manager since the 2014 season. There it is. Okay. Oh, you even found a picture. Okay. And we call our consignment table the community table, although as we discussed in our practice session here, consignment and community table gets put together back and forth easily. It's very fluid. It's like saying sack or bag, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, why do we do the community table? It generates regular revenue, not a huge amount, but it's there. Our grant funding and sponsorships aren't always reliable. And so it's great to have that extra little bit of money coming in. It's a test run for potential vendors, and we've had at least a half dozen new vendors come from being consigning at our table. I would agree with Rebecca, though. Most don't become vendors. A lot of folks consign for 1 or 2 years, and that's it. Our most recent consigner that became a vendor was a consigner for many, 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 many years, but usually it's just a year or two and then they hop on board. One of the other things I really like about the having the community table, and I should say our community table is run out of the manager's booth, and it serves as a venue for folks who want to just donate things. This year we've had several people that had, more apricots than friends. And so because they've seen produce at our booth, they just bring stuff and say, here, this is for you guys. Whatever you want to do with it, if you want to give it away, whatever. But because they have seen products at our booth, it puts it in their mind as this is a great place to donate stuff. It also, one of our big consigners this year is a previous vendor who, because of COVID issues and now retirement, chose not to vend the last couple years, and she does a pop-up market at her church, but she had extra plums that nobody in her little group wanted. Not that there was anything wrong with them, and she had extra apricots. So she knew that she could just donate a box of apricots or plums to us, and we could divvy them up and sell them. We've also, not recently, but in the past, had folks that some folks are embarrassed. They don't want the money from consignment, but they're happy to say, oh, well, you know what? I'm just going to do this, and all the profits go to Relay for Life, which is a big charity here, or to the Civic Center or whatever. And I try to put out a little sign, all profits go to that. It helps do a community thing. The other thing that I really like about having the community booth at the manager's booth is it creates a lot of opportunities for conversation where people are going, oh, so did you grow this? What is this? Explain how the community table works. It gets conversations going about nonprofits and sponsorship and vendors, and just a venue for people to tell us how much they love the market. And I'm going to cough here. It also adds diversity and volume to our market. As Rebecca said, we have no vendors that have figs, but we have one lady that has consistently for many years first donating figs. More recently, I don't know if something's changed in her life, but she's started consigning her figs, and that's marvelous. Another thing that's great about having the community table at the market manager's booth is that when folks come to use their SNAP or run their SNAP cards and collect their double up food bucks, it gives us an actual something to point to say, hey, it's good for herbs like this or this, you could use this, and it's a nice visual tool. And everybody doesn't have the same products. We don't restrict the number of people that can have tomatoes, and everybody's tomatoes are different in that. And once our lettuce vendor, who has a cult following, sells out sometimes, we would sometimes have lettuce that people then could fall back on us. It didn't really affect them at all. And to the same point, it increases the amount of choices for our community. And this one provides referral options for established vendors. Sometimes we have vendors that are approached to do secondary farm, or they have somebody that's been asking them about how hard is it to become a vendor. They can refer to our booth, like try the community booth out first or whatever. It also works the reverse way. Last year, we had someone who has sort of a small flower operation, not enough to be a booth on their own, smaller bouquets than what our regular flower vendor that you saw in my introduction slide has. And we were able, after he came to our community booth one time, he then hooked up with our honey vendor, who was happy to have an extra pretty, colorful thing to have at her booth, and that worked out really well. And of course, it keeps dollars in the community. So go ahead and click to the next slide, Hannah. So this is how we run our community booth. We list the rules in our community rules or in our vendor rules, but I want to talk to all vendors or our assistant manager. We take 20% of daily sales. We used to take 10%, but a few years ago we started doing 20%. We limit somebody can have no more than $55 in total product. If they sell above that $55, the rest comes to the market and goes into our coffers. For instance, the woman with the figs consigned, she actually brought $72 worth of product, and so she got $44, and the rest came to us, and she was happy to do that. Sometimes people will want to bring more than they think they're going to sell because they're maybe not sure. Someone might buy pawpaws or radishes that are grown in corkscrew or something, and so they bring more and they may not sell everything, and that might help them still earn their maximum amount. In the bullet point there, it does say produce. We do take eggs. We used to, after the cottage baking bill, we did take baked goods from folks, but during COVID, we stopped that. So we still will take eggs, but we've just kind of, to keep it clear, put produce on there. And you have to do a little training. People have to have their stuff there by 8:30. And we ask that they come back at the end of the day to pick up their I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the chat there. If you want to go ahead and do my consignment sheet slide, Hannah, thank you. So we have them come in. This is better than when I started. We just had a notebook pad. We ask folks, we don't really limit the number of products, but everything must be priced and packaged. We do not do any weighing. And just in general, a lot of our vendors, and even with COVID, have found, it's easy. Instead of somebody saying, I want a pound of this, I'll take a basket of this. We have little boats like those hot dog boats. So if we get something donated, we can say, okay, 15 equals $4 in that. So we list the person's product, the quantity that they have, the price, and then the total sales in that product. We used to do this all by hand. We do now use Square, and we will put a button in for the person. For instance, when I've brought some things for consignment, it says EI for Eileen. But we usually refer to this because sometimes in the heat of the market, or if you've got a volunteer, they click the wrong button. So it's good to know how many, when someone's consigned, like they brought 18 bags of figs. So you have a backup on there. At the end of the day, we subtract the 20% and then just pay them out in cash at the end of the day. Occasionally, we also get the person's phone number, because if we sell out prior to the end of the day, we can give them a ring, and then maybe when we're not so busy, if they can come back and we can cash them out earlier, that works out. Those are the slides I have. I took the questions that Amanda gave me that folks want to know, and I just made some notes. So I'm going to look at my piece of paper while I do this.
Hey, Eileen, you have about 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. Wow, that went fast. Okay. Also, I would suggest that sometimes you might be able to have a hybrid where you can have maybe a business invoice you and have things at your market and work that out. We make maybe about over $350 a year from consignments. Our staff works it. The amount of time spent on it is really de minimis. I like having the stuff because of the reasons we had before. Our vendors, for the most part, are very supportive of it. During COVID, we had somebody who I think they just wanted to complain about some things, had some things. We have, consigners that come into play. And when we asked for the couple folks that did object, they had no good answers on what we should do. And as I said, I think one thing that somebody did bring up, this person said, what about insurance? We checked with an insurance agent, and they said as long as we're doing produce and eggs, the risk is so de minimis, we really don't need to worry about it. And that's it. Heartwarming Story. We have a lady that used to donate stuff. She's retired, so I think she last year wanted starting a little extra income. She brought a lot of stuff, and when we went to pay her out, she said, that's fine. I'll take $20. You keep the rest. Also, we've had some cute stories with kids where I make them follow the rules, and I always say when I'm speaking for the market, I bet kids remember what 20% means a lot more when they've worked out something to bring the consignment booth than their fourth grade teacher convinced them of. So I'm done. I'm happy to answer any questions. If anybody wants to call me afterwards anytime moving forward, I'm happy to chat with you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Eileen. We're ready to pass it on to Hannah Ladwig at Hood River and, Gorge Grown Farmers Market.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I manage the Hood River Farmers Market. I don't really have many slides. I'll pull up a Google Doc in a second. But kind of to reiterate what Eileen and Rebecca have said, we started we have a community table that is intended to give prospective vendors kind of the chance to try selling at the market to help grow the diversity of goods at the market. We also have a fig lady at our market. And then it provides a nice space for folks who might not have the full quantity to justify a full booth. So we have maybe like 10 to 12 different producers join our community table over the season. It's a pretty easy concept. So we've tweaked it a little bit for COVID, but pre-COVID, we set up a tent and 2 tables, and we limit participation to a maximum of 4 people. So the smallest space anybody would receive is half of a table. You have to sign up ahead of time. Just give me a heads up with an email, a call, or a text. And that's how we limit community table use. In the past, that was a rule adopted maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Before that, the community table would just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So we cap it to a physical space and to a number of vendors. Since COVID, we've kind of expanded that space again, mostly because we don't want to make 4 strangers share a 10 by 10 space. So we've kind of allowed it to creep out a little bit more, but it's a lot more reasonable than how it used to be, where it would grow and grow and grow. We do limit it to farm and food products. So produce, eggs, flowers, and plant starts are totally fine. Our market does have artisans and craft makers. We don't allow that to be sold at the community table. It has to be a farm or food product. And then the booth is staffed by the producer, not the market staff. So somebody comes or they sign up to be at the market at the community table. They sell their product themselves. They can leave when they sell out. They don't have to stay at the whole market, and they just pay 10% of what they're making that day. It's really easy on our staff. I spend maybe a few minutes on it every week. And on average, our producers at the community table are making $300 to $600 combined, which our regular booth space is $25. So we're making more on the community table booth than a regular booth. So that's been helpful too. Not a huge money maker for us. It's not something we ever really put into our budget, but it is helpful. And let's see, I'm trying to think if I have anything else. I think I've covered everything. I'm going to share what our kind of sign up form looks like here. It's just a really basic Google Doc, but it says like the market details, kind of what the space is intended for, a reminder that it's only good for farm and food products. So crafts and art products like that are not eligible. We have a new just little disclaimer in there for COVID, as things are always changing, that you need to, follow whatever protocols are in place as they are always changing. Again, the purpose of the community table to provide a nice direct market outlet for people like home gardeners or for new farmers, and to add to the diversity. So we just gather a little bit of information and then kind of walk through the procedures, have a link to our full vendor packet. But it's a pretty easy operation for us, and has been a really nice piece to the market. It's a nice thing to direct kids to. We have quite a few kids who like to sell at the community table, things like that. We also say that we will reassess a vendor's ability to sell at the community table after 4 uses. And that's for folks who might be able to just justify their own booth and haven't, committed yet. But for people, like, we have a regular vendor who's there. She sells maybe like 10 cartons of eggs every week. She's welcome to sell at the community table beyond the 4 times because her quantity just does not justify a full booth. So we kind of just take it case by case basis. And our vendors, for the most part, really like our community table, like our regular vendors. A lot of them got started at the community table. This is a photo of one of our biggest produce vendors back in 2010. They had just started at the community table. This is them this year. They are, one of our more successful produce vendors. They have a double booth and have a really successful farm. So it's a nice way to grow really successful vendors at your market too. I'm going to stop sharing now. Some challenges or lessons learned. Like I said, limiting the number of folks who are participating. Otherwise, it kind of get unwieldy, limiting the products and the scope of the community table. And then we have had a couple of instances, not in the recent past, because we have had a lot of returning community table vendors, but in the past, we have had to remind people to not undercut regular vendors. For example, if someone's selling eggs for like $3 a dozen, when our regular vendors are selling them for like $6 or $8 or more than that. They don't need to be exactly on, but pretty comparable is what we say. So that's kind of the only kind of tricky tactic you might need to employ if your community table vendors set their own prices. And that's the info I have, and happy to answer any questions that people have.
Thank you so much, Hannah. This has been really great for me. As when I was a market manager, I did not ever have the experience of doing a community table. And so I kind of chose this topic because I wanted to learn more about it, because I never know how to answer people's questions when they come to me about this. So thanks to the 3 of you for educating me on this. I have a few questions. I saw that Hannah put a question in there in the chat. And also Rebecca had a question for Eileen.
Yeah, which I did answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually skipped over something I wanted to say that sort of goes to Hannah's question. So whenever that's appropriate, I'll.
Yeah, so I think, I was going to start with Hannah's questions. And so Eileen, you can answer that, but the questions are to everybody. So make sure that each of the 3 presenters gets to answer if they want to answer. And then we are such a small group. I thought that after that, if you have a question, if you just want to come off mute and ask your question, you can just go ahead. Or if you prefer to have someone read your question off, feel free to just put it in the chat and I will read it for you up to the group. So let's see. So Hannah's questions were, let me get those back. So more information about how prices are set. Do the consigners set their own prices, or do you ever recommend prices? And let's see, and do they ever sell at much lower prices than vendors?
One of the things I was going to say was, we sometimes will suggest prices because people don't know. They literally I don't know. We've had consignees look around to see what other folks are charging. I was going to say, and most of our consigners appreciate any feedback. I also encourage them to make little promotional signs and make their own price signs. Having different prices for different items really doesn't seem to be a problem. We've had folks sell things for maybe less than what vendors would sell, but really not by much, and people want to make money, so it's not really an issue. But for the most part, people are very appreciative of any feedback or selling guidelines that we can give them on how to make themselves more successful. And my background, sales and marketing, so I love selling things and promoting things. So I'm always happy to help on that.
Hannah or Rebecca, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, as most of the people in this room probably realize, it's illegal for a farmer's market to set firm prices for things unless you're organized as legally as an agricultural co-op, which none of us are in Oregon, to the best of my knowledge. However, in the context of the community table, which is kind of an educational setting, I feel a little bit freer to exert upward pressure usually on prices. As Eileen says, many people don't have a frame of reference for this. So you do encourage them to look around the market, or you say, look, here are the other tomatoes we have here and how much those are going for. Even if you don't sell all that you brought, you will do better by doing that. And I mean, I haven't been that hands-on just lately, but I would encourage the operators of our community table to be a little more heavy-handed than I would be with a regular vendor. Heavy-handed in a nice way, of course. And the consigners who are in Eileen's case, if somebody is just dropping it for a donation, they don't have much of an opinion, and you can guide that a lot. Something, are there more questions on Hannah? Because I have one thing I forgot also.
Yep, we do
Could
have
I
more questions.
Interject one thing about like eggs and different things is I also encourage folks to put, if there's something special on their product. For instance, one day we had two people that brought eggs. One was charging $8 a dozen, and the other was doing the more $4. I said, go ahead if you want to charge that, but put why it's that her chickens are in beauty contests or whatever it was. And there were people that bought those $8 eggs before they bought the $4 eggs. So thank you. I'm done.
The thing I forgot is that the farm direct law actually has limitations on what can be sold in consignment. And I'm going to just say in general, you're safe with fruits and vegetables. You're also safe with anything that is licensed itself. So in other words, if somebody comes to you with peach jam and they use the farm direct bill, you have to turn them away with that. But if they are licensed by ODA to do jam, then I feel like that is not working through the farm direct law, but just in the normal course of things, because they could sell that product to a store. So that honors the and eggs are really complicated. I would only want to go offline on that. At one point, we pretty much couldn't do it, and they loosened it a little, but it's still very confusing on that. But nobody is going to be rushing out to your market from ODA to regulate this thing. Right. But just keep in mind, try not to take in items that are sold under an exemption unless you research and make sure that that's okay. Looks like I'm being zoomed on by a cat.
Thanks, Rebecca. I had some, thank you for that. I had some questions about processed foods too. Hannah, do you have anything to add on prices or how your market sets its prices?
Nope. Yeah, just like Rebecca said, suggestions to community table or consignment folks. Yeah.
I see there's a question from Amanda Pastoria about, does anyone set a price limit? And I think that question is referring to like, where do you, like, you don't want someone to just be like, they should be a regular vendor, but they're using the consignment table to be in the market. I'm wondering, I think that's what her question is referring to. And then
someone had said they set a cap of only $55 in product. Does everybody do that, or does anyone else set a dollar value on what you're willing to? I mean, because I mean, my thoughts are, oh my gosh, this person just showed up with $1,000 worth of pumpkins or something. And
I think, Amanda, it's probably more about space than it is about dollars. The pumpkins present an issue in and of themselves from space. And What I think that in Corvallis and Albany, at times we've toyed with putting a dollar limit there, but it's not really functional to manage it with a dollar limit. I think you just kind of use a common sense thing, and people will ask you, how much should I bring? And if there's not enough room on the table, we don't know who's coming every week. It's not, that's the thing. That's what's different about a community table. It's not like a space that's reserved for a particular vendor who has to show up or pay for it if they don't notify you. The whole beauty of this for them is that they can wake up in the morning and decide to bring you something. So with that uncertainty, sometimes we have to put some product under the table and keep restocking it.
Sure.
And sometimes I know that one of my operators came into conflict with some of the consigners over that, because she was trying to rotate whose stuff was out, and the consignor walked up and saw their stuff all under the table, and that got ugly. So I guess my answer is it's about space primarily. You can set a dollar limit, but you may, even if you say $150, that's a lot of pumpkins.
That's a lot of pumpkins.
Yeah, and I would say,
I see that Dallas from the Cully Farmers Market is here, and they said that they do set a limit. Dallas, do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, we don't usually run into like this space problem with goods necessarily, because most of our market, most of our like community booth vendors are craft vendors with like smaller little trinkets. But we just do, $100 limit on that. So if you sell up to $100, that's like your mark for the day. And then a lot of our community booth members, if they're doing that well, will be interested in getting a booth regardless. So it hasn't really been a problem.
yeah, if somebody has $1,000 worth of pumpkins, they need to get a booth. It's just that's the we kind of came up with the
Yes, that was just
$55
an
limit.
example off of the top. Nobody's going to be bringing $1,000 worth of pumpkins, but I mean, that was just an example. But who knows?
Yeah. But the main reason that we have the $55 limit is because then that satisfies vendors as to say, well, why should I come if I could just bring stuff to the community table? And you say, well, you'd be limited to $55 or making $44. So that's kind of, it used to be a lower limit, but we raised it a little bit because it was nice for us to get that extra money. So that's a nice medium in our experience for our market.
Right.
To keep jumping off Amanda's questions, does anyone do anything other than produce, and how about crafts? Sounds like Dallas does crafts.
Yeah, the Cully and the Woodlawn markets do pretty much exclusively crafts. We like let produce vendors come, but so far there's been very little interest in people selling produce. And we also don't offer permanent craft vendor slots in our market. So that's probably why there's so many craft vendors interested in the community booth too. And I often just direct craft vendors who want to be craft vendors at the market to the community booth.
Rebecca, Hannah, or Eileen, do you have anything to add about crafts or no crafts at your?
We don't have any crafts in our market, so I'm not helpful.
Yeah, we have craft vendors at our market, but they have to go through a pretty strict jury process, and then they're only offered spaces on a rotating basis. So to allow craft vendors, number one, we did allow it a few years ago, and it ends up kind of looking, it makes the market look really bad. It like, people just add and add and add, and it starts to look like a garage sale at some point, from what people were bringing. But it also allows us to then, jury products in and fit within our vendor constraints.
The Dalles allows craft vendors, although we have a ratio from farmers to crafters, so we'll always have more farmers, and the crafters need to meet certain standards. But we, at the community table, we only allow essentially produce and eggs occasionally. One other thing is that with the consignment table this year, it's really down, and I think it has a lot to do with the weather that's happened. And that's always something that will happen. And it works the opposite way, where everybody has a ton of apricots and wants to donate them or sell them as well. So it's unpredictable, as the other folks have said.
Those of us in Western Oregon would love to have an apricot problem.
Yeah, it's a good problem.
Can you guys talk some more about liability insurance for your community market booths?
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've even highlighted that to my insurance agent. The insurance we currently have for the market does not require every vendor to have a policy. If it did, then I would have to, well, in the case of the 2 community tables that are run by another farmer, then it would be under their insurance. But then we might then have to have that discussion about whether the market's insurance. If you look at your insurance form, which is called an ACORD form, ACORD, it's the nice 1-page summary that's not quite in English. It has, speaking of not quite in English, there's a line on it that says PROD/COMP, something like that. It means products and completed operations. So if your market insurance does not have product liability for the market, maybe that would be something to explore. But if it does, I think it could handle the de minimis risk of having the community table. Sorry, I stole that word from you.
Yeah, that's when I talked to an insurance agent who was a former sponsor, and she said, again, the risk is de minimis as long as you're doing, produce and that sort of thing. And so we've not worried about it. And one could also make the argument, if somebody got sick from eating a fig, they probably ate a bunch of other stuff that day. Who knows? They probably couldn't identify where they got sick anyway. But anyway.
Anna and Dallas, do you have anything to add?
I think the fact that our producers have to sell their products is a lot easier in this realm. It lets them fall into some of those exemptions that Rebecca had mentioned, like the farm direct and that sort of thing. And
they are selling their own. I mean, yeah, with their body there, then you don't have to worry about whether it's a consignment or not. So in some ways, your community table it's not a consignment. It's just it's a good arrangement to create very small opportunities and divide the space differently.
Yep, exactly.
But it shares many qualities to what the other things do, but one of them is not the financial arrangement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really hands off for us. It kind of limits our hands in the pot, which I think is a lot easier for everybody.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so for our markets, maybe this is different from y'all's, but like our community vendors sit there with their goods the whole time, like at their table space, and it's a first come, first serve space. And we've in our community, there's so much interest that like the tables are like very full these days. And I'm worried that we're gonna hit a point where like the tables are gonna be too full. Do you guys have a rule of thumb for like turning people away? Like at what point does the first come first space like become too much? Like, do you have a certain number of people, or do you mark out spaces beforehand? What does that look like for y'all? Because we also have vendors now that are like bringing their own tables, and they're like, oh, it's okay that there's not enough table space, like I got this. And I'm kind of like, no, like how do you navigate that is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I feel like that's where we were a few years ago, where people would just be like, well, it's fine, I'll just add another table. But we limit it to 2 tables to 4 producers. So the smallest they have is half of a table. And pre-COVID, it was confined to one space. Now it takes up 2 spaces so people can separate a little bit more, but it's the basic same rule of thumb where we limit the number to 4 people and 2 tables.
Hannah, can you give an example of actually what you might say on site to someone who's come up to you and is like, oh, but I have my table. It'll be like, how do you actually have that conversation?
Yeah. So now in order to avoid that situation, we have people reserve it. They can reserve it up to the night before. And all they have to do is email, call, or send a text that says like, is there room at the community table for me tomorrow or whatever. That message doesn't get out to everybody. Sometimes they think it's like still operating how it used to years ago. But then you just say, well, the space is reserved. We have 4 people. If it happens where we only have like maybe 2 people at the community table, obviously they're welcome to join then, even if they didn't reserve and we have this space. But now we do require that people just reserve it because it makes your life, you have a lot going on at the market. Like somebody's selling $50 worth of apples or like $50 worth of whatever might not be your number one priority. So it allows you to kind of like free up your time at the market too, just to have a quick conversation with somebody before market starts. Like, sorry, we're full, or yes, we have room.
Would be good to have an answer in hand about where to donate stuff. We have at our Corvallis markets, we have gleaners that come at the end of the market day, and somebody could indicate on their consignment sheet that they are willing for the gleaners to pick it up. Unfortunately, I think our gleaners have gotten the message that the community table is an iffy space because if the operators don't know they can give it away, they're not going to give away somebody's product and just say, here's your money. Because maybe, you know, in many cases, the operators or the consigners were expecting to bring that home and process it for their own family, perhaps. So having some kind of an alternative answer might be good if indeed there is one for you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that that's not as applicable to our market because it's mostly crafts, not produce that are coming in. But thanks for that. And it is good. I do need to know like the local free fridge closest to both of our markets.
Yeah, obviously they're not going to donate earrings there.
Do we have any other questions from the group? Well, thank you everyone for coming. I learned a lot. I guess we don't really have time to start another discussion at this point, but if there's any ideas for topics you want in the future, if you just want to leave that in the chat on your way out, or you can always email me if other ideas come to you about what you'd like to be talking about at these circles. You can email me at amanda@oregonfarmersmarkets.org. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for arranging this, ladies. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.